This 4-year-old street urchin is tied up and left on the sidewalk, but a millionaire saw everything and did something that shocked everyone. Watch until the end. You won't regret it. Comment on what you think will happen. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. Your help is very important. The desperate cry echoed through the brick-paved streets of Charleston like a lament that cut through the crisp morning air of South Carolina. Montgomery Monty Sterling, 52, nearly spilled his coffee when he glanced out the window of his construction firm's office and witnessed a scene that would forever alter his life. A frantic woman hurried down the sidewalk across from the building, her hurried steps resonating against the backdrop of the historic city. But what made Monty freeze wasn't the woman's haste, it was what she abandoned. There, seated on the curb like a discarded parcel, was a little girl of approximately 4 years. The child remained motionless, her small arms wrapped around her knees, her face buried between her thin legs. Her clothes were torn and soiled, and there was something about the way she cowered that evoked a strange feeling in Monty's chest, a mix of compassion and recognition he couldn't quite place. Monty bolted down the marble stairs of his office, leaving behind the contracts scattered across his mahogany desk and the meticulous routine that had governed his days for decades. As a successful real estate developer, he was accustomed to resolving complex problems, but he had never confronted anything like this. As he neared the girl, she raised her face for the first time. Her eyes were large and dark, laden with a sadness that no child should know. What struck Monty the most was the absolute silence. She wasn't crying, not shouting, simply observing him with an unsettling intensity. "Hey there, little one," Monty said, crouching down to her level. "What's your name?" The girl didn't respond. Instead, she picked up a piece of charcoal from the ground and began to draw on the sidewalk. Simple lines, almost scribbles, but there was something in those drawings that made Monty's heart race. They were birds, small birds flying towards the sun. "You like birds?" He tried again. Once more, silence. The child continued drawing as if it were the only way she knew how to communicate with the world. Monty scanned the surroundings, searching for the woman who had abandoned the girl, but she had vanished completely into the labyrinthine alleyways of the city. The aroma of freshly baked bread wafted from nearby bakeries, mingling with the scent of coffee that always permeated Charleston mornings. But there was something off about the idyllic scene. It was then that he noticed something that made him question his own sanity. On the girl's right arm, partially concealed by her tattered sleeve, was a small star-shaped scar. Monty felt the blood drain from his face. He himself had an identical birthmark in the same location, an impossible coincidence that defied all logic. "Mr. Sterling," the voice of Bethany, his secretary, echoed from the office doorway. "There's an urgent call from the downtown construction site." Reality snapped back into focus. Monty was a practical, controlled man who didn't believe in coincidences or signs of fate. But something about this silent child stirred deep within his soul, awakening memories he preferred to keep buried. "Call social services," he murmured to Bethany, without taking his eyes off the girl, "and cancel my morning appointments." While waiting for the social worker to arrive, Monty remained seated on the sidewalk beside the child. She continued drawing, now creating a small house with smoke billowing from the chimney. There was a strange technique in her movements, as if she had drawn those same images hundreds of times. "Are you hungry?" he asked, offering a cookie he had asked Bethany to fetch from the bakery. The girl looked at the food, then at him, and for the first time she offered something that might have been a smile. She took the cookie delicately, as if it were something precious. When Giselle Atkinson arrived, a woman of 35 in professional attire with a briefcase full of papers, Monty felt a strange reluctance to hand over the child. There was something about the way the social worker looked at the girl, too professional, too detached. "Mr. Sterling will arrange for a temporary shelter for her," Giselle said, making notes on her clipboard. "It's standard procedure in cases of abandonment." "What if I wanted to care for her temporarily?" The words escaped Monty's mouth before he could consider them. "Until you find a suitable family." Giselle stopped writing and looked at him in surprise. "Sir, that's very complicated. There are protocols to follow, background checks, home visits." "I can expedite the process," Monty insisted, surprising himself with his own determination. "I have resources, a large home, financial stability." The girl, who had remained silent throughout the conversation, suddenly stood up and took Monty's hand. Her small fingers were cold, but there was a strange strength in that simple gesture, as if she were choosing to stay with him. Giselle hesitated, looking back and forth between Monty and the child. "I'll need to make some calls. The case will have to undergo a special evaluation." At that moment, watching the social worker walk away with the phone to her ear, Monty realized he had made a decision that would change his life forever. But there was something about the way Giselle spoke on the phone, turning away so he couldn't hear, that aroused his first suspicion that the situation was more complex than it seemed. Scarlett Sterling was finalizing a presentation for investors when Bethany called with the news that would alter the course of her marriage. At 48, she had built a solid career as a financial consultant, always maintaining absolute control over every aspect of her life, including the deliberate decision not to have children. An abandoned child. "Monty, have you completely lost your mind?" Scarlett exploded when she arrived at the office and found her husband still sitting on the sidewalk with the girl. "We don't know anything about her, where she came from, what diseases. She might have—" Monty raised his eyes, and Scarlett saw something she didn't recognize in her husband's gaze. There was a fierce determination there, mixed with a vulnerability she hadn't seen in years, not since the loss of the baby they had been expecting 10 years earlier, a subject they had buried so deeply they rarely spoke about it. "Look at her, Scarlett," Monty said softly. "Really look." The girl continued drawing, now creating small figures that seemed to be dancing around a fire. Her movements were too precise for a 4-year-old, as if she were following a memorized pattern. When Scarlett reluctantly crouched down, the child looked up and stared at her with that same unsettling intensity. For a moment, Scarlett felt something stir in her chest, an emotion she had buried so long ago that she barely recognized it. But she quickly regained her composure, rising and crossing her arms. "Monty, we're practical people. We can't just adopt a child like picking up a stray animal," she said, her voice softer but still firm. "Think about our life, our routine. I have my consulting firm. You have your company." It was then that Giselle returned, putting away her cell phone with a strange expression on her face. "Mr. Sterling, I spoke with my superiors. In exceptional cases, we can consider temporary custody while we investigate the case." "What kind of investigation?" asked Scarlett, always suspicious of bureaucratic processes. "We need to find out who this child is, where she came from, why she was abandoned," replied Giselle, but there was something evasive in her response. "The strange thing is, we don't have any missing person reports that match her description." Monty frowned. "What do you mean? A child this age doesn't just appear out of nowhere." "You don't exactly," said Giselle, kneeling beside the girl. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your name?" The child stopped drawing and looked at Giselle distrustfully. Instead of answering, she moved closer to Monty, as if seeking protection. It was the first time she had shown a preference for anyone. "She doesn't speak," observed Scarlett, and there was something in her voice that Monty couldn't identify, compassion or concern. "Psychological trauma," explained Giselle. "It's common in cases of severe abandonment. I'll schedule a consultation with Dr. Bartholomew Bart Rockwood. our specialized child psychologist. In the following hours, while Giselle handled the paperwork for temporary custody, Monty and Scarlett took the girl home. The colonial mansion they had restored on the outskirts of Charleston had never seemed so large and silent. The child walked through the spacious rooms with restrained curiosity, her bare feet making soft noises on the wooden floors. When they reached the guest room that would temporarily be hers, she went straight to the darkest corner and sat on the floor. "There's a comfortable bed here," said Scarlett, trying to be gentle. "Clean sheets, soft pillows." The girl shook her head vigorously and remained on the floor. When Monty brought a blanket and offered to stay on the floor with her, Scarlett saw something that deeply disturbed her, a solitary tear rolling down her husband's face. On that first night, the Sterlings discovered that their new reality would be much more challenging than they had imagined. The child woke up screaming 3 times, always at the same time, 3 in the morning. They weren't ordinary nightmare screams. They were howls of pure terror that made the neighbors turn on their lights. "For God's sake, what have we done?" murmured Scarlett the 3rd time they rushed down the stairs. They found the girl huddled under the kitchen table, trembling uncontrollably. Monty approached slowly, as if she were an injured animal. "It's okay, little one. You're safe now." But the child wouldn't calm down. In desperation, Monty began to hum a melody that his mother used to sing to him when he was little, a folk song about birds flying over mountains. To everyone's surprise, the girl stopped trembling and raised her face. There was recognition in her eyes, as if she knew that song. The next day, Dr. Bart Rockwood arrived at the Sterling mansion with 40 years of experience in childhood trauma weighing on his shoulders. At 60, he had seen many difficult cases, but the child he encountered left him genuinely perplexed. "I've never seen such a complete block," he confided to Monty after the first session. "It's not just selective mutism. It's as if someone has erased part of her memory." "Is that possible?" asked Monty, feeling a strange chill down his spine. "In cases of extreme trauma, yes, but the pattern here is different. It's very specific, as if it were deliberate." Meanwhile, Scarlett was discovering unexpected aspects of herself. Observing the child's vulnerability awakened maternal instincts she thought she had extinguished years ago. She found herself buying children's clothes, preparing special meals, even humming lullabies she didn't remember learning. But it was Giselle who brought the first truly disturbing revelation. 3 days after temporary custody was approved, she appeared at the Sterling home with a tense expression. "We've identified the woman who abandoned the child," she announced, consulting her papers. "Dolores Lola Farmer, 42 years old. But here's the problem. She's not the biological mother." Monty felt the world spin slightly. "What do you mean?" "Lola worked as a nurse's aide at a medical clinic that closed down 6 months ago. She had been caring for the girl for only 3 months since the real guardian disappeared." Scarlett approached, anxiety growing in her chest. "And who was the previous guardian?" Giselle hesitated before answering, and in that hesitation, Monty realized there was much more to this story than she was revealing. "We're still investigating. But there's something more concerning. The clinic where Lola worked had serious irregularities. The establishment was shut down by the state medical board for practicing unauthorized procedures." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the child scribbling on paper. When they looked at her, they saw that she had drawn something new, a construction that looked strangely familiar to Monty. It was the exact outline of a house he knew very well, the house of his childhood, demolished more than 20 years ago. The drawing of his childhood home haunted Monty throughout the night. How could a 4-year-old child know details of a building that hadn't existed for decades? He decided to act on his own, and the next morning drove to the neighborhood where he grew up, on the outskirts of Charleston. The land where the old house stood now housed a small market, but Monty could visualize every room of the residence he had lived in until he was 15. It was there that his sister Hope had disappeared one night when he was 12 and she was only 8. The family never talked about it, a silence that had become as natural as breathing. Monty. The voice pulled him from his thoughts. It was Connie May, a 78-year-old woman who had lived on the street forever. "Haven't seen you around here in years, boy." "Connie May," he greeted, forcing a smile. "I was remembering the old house." "Ah, yes, those were tough times," she said, her face clouding over. "Your mom never recovered after little Hope vanished. She was such a special child, always drawing little birds on the walls." Monty's blood ran cold. "Little birds?" "Yes, naughty child. Your mum would scold her because she scribbled charcoal on the walls, always the same drawings, little birds flying." Monty felt his legs weaken. The connection was impossible, but it was there, as blatant as a punch to the gut. He quickly said goodbye to Connie May and returned home, his heart pounding erratically. Meanwhile, Scarlett was discovering that caring for the child awakened emotions she had buried long ago. She found herself watching the girl's every gesture, noticing how she ate with excessive delicacy, as if each bite were a privilege. There were small scars on her arms, marks that seemed too deliberate to be accidental. "Dr. Rockwood, these marks," Scarlett began during the afternoon therapy session. "They're consistent with repetitive medical procedures," he replied gravely. "Someone experimented on this child. The question is, who and why?" The girl, who had been temporarily christened Hope by the Sterlings, continued to communicate only through drawings, but that day her scribbles took a disturbing turn. She drew a room with several beds, people in white, coats and syringes. In the center of the page, a child lying down with her arms outstretched. "My God," Scarlett whispered, covering her mouth with her hands. Dr. Rockwood studied the drawing with a somber expression. "This confirms my suspicions. She was subjected to repetitive traumatic procedures, probably at the clinic Giselle mentioned." At that moment, Giselle arrived for a follow-up visit, but her behavior was strangely nervous. She avoided eye contact, and her hands trembled slightly. As she flipped through the papers, "How's the investigation process going?" asked Monty, noticing the social worker's tension. "We found some information about Lola," Giselle replied, her voice slightly shaky. "She confessed that she received money to care for the child. A lot of money. But when pressed about who paid her, she panicked and said she couldn't talk." "Why not?" insisted Scarlett. "Fear, genuine terror. Lola said that if she spoke, terrible things would happen to her." The revelation created a heavy atmosphere in the room. Hope, who was playing quietly in the corner, suddenly dropped her pencils and hid under the table. Her behavior changed drastically, as if she understood perfectly what was being discussed. "She understands more than she lets on," observed Dr. Rockwood. "The trauma has affected her ability to speak, but not her intelligence." It was then that Monty made a decision that would change everything. Against Scarlett's advice, and ignoring legal protocols, he hired Rocky Calhoun, a 45-year-old private investigator known for his discretion and efficiency. "I want you to find out everything about this clinic," Monty instructed in Rocky's office. "Who were the doctors? What kind of procedures did they do? Why was it shut down?" Rocky, a lean man with piercing eyes, made meticulous notes. "Mr. Sterling, investigations involving irregular medical establishments can reveal things you'd rather not know." "I need to know," Monty insisted. "This child has suffered horrors we can barely imagine. Someone has to pay for this." 3 days later, Rocky returned with information that left Monty nauseated. The St. Jude Clinic, where Lola worked, had been investigated for conducting illegal experiments on orphaned children. Officially, they offered treatment for childhood trauma, Unofficially, they developed techniques for suppressing and altering memories. The procedures were funded by a group of local businessmen, Rocky explained, showing photographed documents. Apparently, they wanted to develop treatments to erase traumatic memories of relatives who served in military conflicts. Using children as guinea pigs? Asked Monty, horrified. Exactly, orphaned children with no family to look for them. The project was led by Dr. Thaddeus Vance, a neurologist who lost his medical license for unethical practices. Scarlett, who had listened to everything in silence, finally spoke. And Hope was one of those children? Worse than that, said Rocky, his expression becoming even more grave. From the records I was able to obtain, she wasn't just any guinea pig. She was a special case. There was something specific they wanted to do with her. That night, while Hope slept on the floor of the room, she still refused to use the bed. Monty and Scarlett had the most difficult conversation of their marriage. "This is consuming us," said Scarlett, the tears finally coming. "You're barely working. I've cancelled 3 important contracts. And why? For a child who may be irreparably damaged." Monty looked at his wife, seeing in her the same vulnerability he felt. "Because it's the right thing to do, because someone needs to care about her. Or because she reminds you of Hope," Scarlett said softly, touching on the subject they had avoided for decades. The silence that followed was broken by a sound coming from Hope's room. They rushed in and found the girl sitting on the floor, not sleeping, but drawing in the moonlight streaming through the window. This time, the drawing was different. It was the face of an older girl, with long hair and a sad smile. Below the drawing, in shaky but legible letters, was written a name that made Monty feel the world collapse around him. Hope. How could that child know that name? How could she draw the face of his missing sister with an accuracy that only someone who knew her intimately could have? And even more disturbing, in the lower corner of the paper, Hope had drawn a small ring with an inscription. Monty recognized it immediately. It was identical to the ring Hope wore when she disappeared, a unique piece that his grandmother had left her. Scarlett noticed her husband's paleness. "Monty, what is it?" But he couldn't speak. The reality that was forming in his mind was so impossible, so disturbing, that it defied all logic. Somehow, this child had connections to his past that transcended any rational explanation. What if the experiences at the clinic weren't just about erasing memories, but about implanting them? What if someone had transformed Hope into a repository of Hope Sterling's memories? The drawing of Hope changed everything. Monty spent the entire night studying each line, each detail that Hope had captured with an impossible precision. When the sun rose over the Charleston landscape, he had made a decision that terrified and relieved him at the same time. "Rocky, I need you to find my father," Monty said on the phone, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "He's been in a psychiatric clinic in Raleigh for 15 years. It's time to have a conversation that should have happened a long time ago." The trip to the state capital was tense. Scarlett had insisted on accompanying him, leaving Hope in the care of Dr. Rockwood. The girl had cried silently when she realized they were leaving, the first tears she had shed since coming into their lives. Fred Sterling, at 78, was a shadow of the powerful man Monty remembered from his childhood. The businessman who had built an empire in the real estate business now spent his days sitting in a wheelchair, staring blankly out the window of his room at the clinic. "Dad," Monty said softly, sitting down in front of him. Frederick's eyes slowly focused on his son. For years he had pretended not to recognize anyone, but something in Monty's voice brought him back to reality. "Monty, my boy," he whispered, his voice weak but lucid. "You shouldn't be here." "I need to know about Hope," Monty said directly. "I need to know what really happened to her." Frederick's face contorted in pain. "No, I can't," They said, if I spoke. Who said, Dad? Who threatened you? It was then that Frederick began to cry, silent tears from a man who had carried a terrible secret for 4 decades. She didn't disappear, Monty. I gave her away. The world stopped for Monty. What do you mean? Your sister was special, very special. She remembered things she shouldn't remember. She dreamed of places she had never visited. She drew people she had never met. The doctors said it was a rare phenomenon, advanced genetic memory. Scarlett held Monty's hand, feeling him tremble. What doctors? Dr. Thaddeus Vance, Frederick whispered. He contacted me when Hope was 8 years old. He said she could be the key to understanding the transmission of memories between generations. He offered a fortune for my cooperation. You sold your own daughter? Monty's voice came out as a muffled scream. No, he said he only needed to study her for a few months, that she would come back. But then, Frederick hunched over. She died during the experiments. Dr. Vance told me there were complications, but he had recorded everything, every memory, every dream, every drawing. The truth fell on Monty like an avalanche. And 40 years later, he used those memories on another child. Hope, Frederick whispered. When Dr. Vance contacted me 2 years ago, he said he had found a way to transfer Hope's memories to another child, that my girl could live again. Scarlett stood up abruptly. This is monstrous. This child was tortured to satisfy the sick grief of a father who couldn't accept the loss. He promised me it would be different this time, continued Frederick, ignoring the accusations, that the memories would be implanted gradually, that there would be no pain. But something went wrong. The clinic was shut down, said Monty, beginning to understand the terrible complexity of the situation. And Hope was left with fragments of Hope's memories mixed with her own traumas. The trip back to Charleston was silent. Monty drove automatically, processing revelations that changed everything he thought he knew about his family, about himself, about the child he had chosen to protect. When they arrived home, they found Dr. Rockwood waiting with an expression of urgency on his face. Monty, Scarlett, something extraordinary has happened, he said immediately. Hope spoke. She said a complete sentence. What did she say? Asked Scarlett, her heart racing. I want to go home with my brother. The silence that followed was profound. Hope appeared in the doorway, still shy, but her eyes shone with a clarity that hadn't been there before. She ran to Monty and, for the first time, hugged him. You're my brother at heart, she said in her small but firm voice. Not from the belly, but from the heart. Monty knelt down to her level, tears streaming freely down his face. How do you know that, little one? I dream of a girl who loved you very much. She wanted me to find you and tell you it wasn't your fault she went away. Dr. Rockwood watched the scene with professional fascination. The implanted memories are integrating with her natural personality. It's as if Hope is saying goodbye through Hope. In the following days, Hope's transformation was remarkable. She began to speak more, always with the strange wisdom of someone who carried memories that weren't her own. But there was something else. She was choosing which memories to keep and which to let go. The sad memories are going away, she explained to Monty one afternoon while they were drawing together in the garden. I only keep the good ones, like when you sang to her or when you played birdie. Scarlett, who had fought against her maternal instincts throughout her adult life, found herself completely surrendered to the love for that extraordinary child. She chose us, she said to Monty one night, as much as we chose her. Dr. Vance was found and arrested after the investigation revealed by Rocky. Giselle confessed to being bribed to hide information, but she also helped locate other children who had been victims of the experiments. The network of corruption that funded the clinic was exposed, leading several local businessmen to prison. 6 months later, Hope's adoption papers were finalized. She had chosen to keep the name Monty had given her, symbolizing her new identity. During the ceremony at the courthouse, she made a point of holding both of her adoptive parents' hands. "Hope wanted me to be happy," she told the judge, with the seriousness of someone who carried 2 lives in one, "and I'm very happy now." That night, for the first time since arriving at the Sterling family, Hope slept in the bed. Monty and Scarlett stood watching her through the half-open door, seeing her hug the teddy bear they had bought her. "Do you think she still dreams of Hope?" asked Scarlett. "I think now she dreams of her own future," replied Monty, gently closing the door. In the room, Hope murmured softly in her sleep, "Thank you, brother. Now I can rest in peace." And for the first time in 4 decades, Monty felt that his sister had finally found rest. The family that was born of a tragedy had become real through unconditional love. Hope would forever carry the memories of 2 lives, but she had chosen to live only one, her own, alongside the people who loved her not for what she represented from the past, but for the future they would build together. Years later, when Hope would become a young artist, known for her drawings of birds flying free over mountains, she would tell that sometimes she still heard a soft voice whispering gratitude in her dreams. It was Hope, finally at peace, knowing that she had fulfilled her last mission, to bring love and healing to the brother who never stopped looking for her. If you enjoyed this wonderful story, please comment. Your opinion is very important. And if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.